this confession of Peter. Too loud? Better? Okay. But I had this confession of Peter where he said that Jesus was the Christ, right? And it was this great confession. And it was a big deal, right? Especially in comparison to the way that others had been perceiving who Jesus was. And to follow that up, Jesus basically said, that means that I'm going to die. That's what's going to happen. And of course, that doesn't make sense to Peter. That doesn't make sense, I think, to anybody without being on this side of the cross and having it explained to us. And so it's this kind of difficult situation. And so that's followed up with what we see in chapter 17, right? Here's this confession, here's this understanding, here's this difficulty. And so now all of this is kind of revealed and approved and declared by God himself as we get into chapter 17. So chapter 17, verse 1, and after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John his brother, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. And his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. And Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He was still speaking when, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. And when the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were terrified. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, Rise and have no fear. And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, Tell no one the vision, until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. And the disciples asked him, Then why did the scribes say that first Elijah must come? And he answered, Elijah does come, and he will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come. And they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they pleased. So also the Son of Man will certainly suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them of John the Baptist. What do you all make of this? Transfiguration. We get, to be honest, 2 of the, strange may not be the right word, but stranger stories in Matthew in this very same chapter, and this is one of them. Transfiguration is always interesting to me. What do you all make of it? Yeah. I don't know that they had pictures. Right. But somehow they knew. Yeah. Yeah. There was like a golden sign above each of their heads with an arrow pointing at them. Elijah, Moses. Why was he? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Does this make any sort of implication to us about what the afterlife is like? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, Jesus does call it a vision. So were they actually there? I don't know. It's like Ezekiel and his temple vision, right? Did Ezekiel actually go back and see the temple, or is it a vision of the temple? Like, what could it be happening type thing? Like, I don't know. Like, the Bible's weird when it talks about visions. So they had a vision of Elijah and Moses. Maybe they were actually there. Maybe they weren't. Maybe it was a vision. Maybe it is them. I don't know. I could be convinced either way, I guess. Yeah, Ian. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I there's a lot written about why Elijah and Moses. I mean, I think it makes sense to us. I think pretty good Bible students, we understand the significance of the law of Moses, of the prophets, Elijah kind of being the standard bearer for the idea of what a prophet is. He's the one that's called up into heaven in a whirlwind. So the law and the prophets here represented, and Jesus fulfilling those things. I think that kind of makes sense to us on that level. Were you going to say something, Michael?
visual representation. That Jesus is the authority. He is the one you listen to. And the audience really comes down to Peter, James, and John. He doesn't do it before the Sanhedrin. He doesn't do it before anybody else.
Yeah.
But every time God makes this type of proclamation, it's to a few. I mean, 3 or 4 people, max. I mean, whenever Jesus is baptized, the only guy there is John the Baptist, that we know. Whenever here, you see this massive revelation coming out. And the only people that see it are Peter, James, and John. And what are they expected to do with it?
It will not tell anybody. Right.
Everything's still a secret.
Which is amazing. And it's interesting. So why them? I mean, Peter's the one that just said he's the Messiah. So why is the transfiguration for him? I mean, James and John are there too, obviously, but let's just focus on Peter because we just saw the confession of Peter, right? So why does Peter need the transfiguration? And it's a big deal, isn't it? Like it's such a strange thing to me because it's like we get a couple verses and we move on, and it isn't even like Paul or some of the other New Testament books spend a lot of time talking about the transfiguration. You'd think like this is a big deal. Like this is like transfigured, shown like the sun, alive. Like this is like big time stuff. And yet it's almost just like the next piece in the story and we move on. And so it's almost like it isn't as big of a deal as it is, but it's a massive deal, but it's only shown to these 3 people. And it's the people who probably already believed. So then why did they need this? Kind of interesting. Any other thoughts? I mean, I think all that's true, but yeah, go ahead, Mark. No, you're great.
It's one of those where, verse 7, Jesus came to them and touched them and said, "Get up and don't be afraid." Well, what would your natural reaction be? You'd be terrified.
Yeah.
I mean, here's something you've never seen before. You've almost got to pinch yourself to make sure that you're really there.
Yeah.
And Jesus is saying, and he uses that phrase, "Don't be afraid," multiple times too. He's constantly trying to reinforce them. You need to be comfortable with this. And they're not.
And that goes along with, I mean, obviously, I think we see the echoes of Sinai, right? Moses goes up Sinai and he comes down, his face is shining because of the presence of God, and he has to put a veil on his face. At Sinai, God speaks to them from the top of the mountain, and the people are terrified. And as Ian said, they're like, "Moses, you go," right? So like, I think we see some of this similar sort of stuff that happened at Sinai here with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. And I think we should see some of those parallels, right? That this is the next iteration of that this is a fulfillment of those things. This is the next kind of piece. But it isn't that he's coming down with the 10 Commandments and these stone tablets, right? Like, no, he is the one that you listen to. It's not that he has the words of God that you listen to. He is the one you listen to. And God speaks and tells them, Jesus is the one who bears authority. Which, okay, so you have the law, right? Which is God spoken to Moses, Moses relayed to the people, right? And you get the stuff that he relays to them in Exodus, and then right before they go into Canaan, in Deuteronomy, he gives them the second sermon, right? And it's like the rest of the law that they need to know. And these are all the things that God told him that he is telling them that they need to know. So it's the word of God, right? And Elijah and the prophets, what were they? They were simply the spokespeople for God. They were the messengers. And so this is God speaking through these individuals throughout the entirety of the Old Testament. And what makes them incredible is that they had the words of God, right? And what is God saying here? Don't listen to these guys who have the words of God. Listen to God himself. Listen to Jesus, because he's the one who has the words you need to listen to. And it's kind of a tremendous thing, because now it's no longer that there's a messenger or a go-between. You simply listen to Jesus. He has that kind of authority. So then the interesting question, because that's a big deal, right? Law, prophets, now it's replaced with Jesus. He's the significant one. But why just Peter, James, and John? Well, because they already believed, right? Like, it isn't just that this is a faith-building exercise for them. That's not necessarily the point, because it isn't, as pointed out, it isn't for the Sanhedrin, it isn't for the masses. This is for those who have already confessed, I think is the idea. Those that already believe. And the idea isn't to teach them something new, but to reaffirm to show and to prove that you were right, that you need to believe in these things because of what's going to happen. And this thing that occurs that you've witnessed, yeah, that'll be a sign to everybody else later. But it's important for you all now because you've already confessed, you've demonstrated that faith. You are close enough to Jesus to know those things. And so God speaks to them. And so it's less a proof of faith as much as a sign of faith, I think, is maybe a way to look at that. And that's kind of a big deal. But it also makes a big difference for Peter, James, and John to have experienced this, right? To have heard the voice of God, to have witnessed these things. Now, of course, it doesn't make them immune to their faith doubting. I mean, Peter denying Jesus, all those sorts of things. But it is a testament to that sort of stuff. And it isn't a coincidence that Matthew puts it right after Peter's confession, right? So it's kind of an interesting timing, big deal sort of thing for these men to have experienced this. Is your hand up, David?
There's a saying, strike the shepherd and sheep scatter. What Jesus, I think, and God is trying to make sure happens, doesn't happen, he's not going to be the exception. Jesus is going to be struck down. Obviously, he's going to be raised in 3 days. But he's not going to be there forever. He's got to prepare them. And so what he's doing with this scripture, among the other things, they needed to see all of these things reiterated over and over so that when Jesus went through what, I mean, they still were stuck in this mindset of we're going to have a physical leader that brings back a physical Zion. That isn't what the message is about. And so, he needs the people who believe to understand really what his purpose is. And I think this is another example where he's trying to make that.
Yeah.
Over and over. Otherwise, they would have scattered. Why do we still have all these documents after he was killed? They didn't give up because they had seen enough to make them realize this was all wrong.
And I think part of this, and there's been a lot of writing trying to show some of the parallels almost, the inverted parallels between this and the crucifixion itself, right? The lifting up, the shining of Jesus versus the shame of the cross, right? The confession of God versus the confession of a centurion, right? The apostles being there versus the apostles being scattered. I don't know if there's how much to read into that and how much that specifically matters, but I do think that the cross itself is the sign of Christianity in the sense that it is taking the shame of the world and inverting it, right? It is subjecting yourself to the shame and the death that exists in the world, and yet surviving through, passing through the veil in the resurrection, right? I have a friend who's preaching a sermon today that he was really excited about, specifically about the shame of the cross. And he was reading all this stuff historically about the way that the cross would have been viewed and how incredible it is that we don't immediately think of the cross the same way. Because it is, in some ways, the ultimate way of punishing somebody, of torturing somebody, and of demonstrating your power over them, right? I saw a video of a guy, 2 cars pulled over, arguing in traffic, and a guy gets out of the first car with a bat and starts pointing it at the other guy, threateningly. And the dude gets out of this car and he just takes the bat from him and throws it on the ground and starts pointing his finger at him. And the guy's trying to yell back, but clearly at this point, he's been defeated, you've been humiliated. There's a different type of power that you're facing here. And we recognize that, and it's kind of funny, right? To be humiliated or to be demonstrated that you don't have power, you fight somebody sort of thing. You're playing basketball and somebody dunks on you and you can't do anything. There's these moments that we experience of humiliation because somebody else has this power over you, right? And one of the clearest ways to do that is to completely subdue somebody so they can't do anything, right? That's what the crucifixion is of any individual. We will nail you to a cross where you can't do anything, and we're going to lift you up so everybody can see that you can't do anything. And we will laugh at you and watch you as you struggle to breathe. It is the ultimate in shame because you're naked, you can't cover yourself, you can't breathe, you can't get down. And it's like the height of this, because it's taking your life and showing power over your life. It's shame and humiliation, and it's a complete immobilization of what you are as a human, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? And yet that very symbol, and Jesus submitting himself to that kind of death and that kind of shame, is the very thing that defeats death itself, right? It's a different kind of power. That the most kind of power you can demonstrate in the world is taking somebody's life, humiliating them, crucifying them, whatever it is. And Jesus says there's a different kind of power you don't understand. And so the glory of the cross is kind of in its shame, that the shame that exists there doesn't matter relative to the power that Jesus has and is demonstrating in the earth. And it rewrites the nature of the world because of that. The transfiguration, I think, in some ways, is demonstrating that. It's how we should view the cross. It is the glory of God. It is the confession of God. It is shining like the sun in this inverted way. Because as we've talked about from the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, this whole story, this whole nature of the kingdom is to change the world fundamentally. And you don't change the world by doing the things that the world does. I mean, think about a political movement, right? Like some sort of French Revolution or something like that. There's a tyrannical government that's oppressing their people. And so what do the people do? They band together and they gather arms and they overthrow the government, right? And they kill the leaders that were killing them. And it's like, we've changed things, right? No, you've done the exact same thing that they were doing. And you may think that you've twisted things or overthrown them. And in America, it's like we have this kind of constant revolutionary idea, even though we haven't revolted since, we cast off the shackles of the monarchy, right? But like we have this constant kind of iconoclastic idea, like we go against the grain, like we distrust those in power, right? It's almost in our DNA as humans. And yet the way that we overthrow the powers that be is by electing people to be the powers that be. Because that's what we know as humans. And what did Jesus do? He didn't lead a revolution in a traditional sense. He didn't kill anybody. He didn't lift a sword. He died and was shamed on the cross. And yet, he rose on the third day. And the difference that occurs there is that the world has now changed. And from the beginning of the gospel to now, Jesus is showing the way that he has fulfilled the law and the prophets. He has done what Israel couldn't do, right? What we couldn't do. And he's showing a better way. And in the process, he's establishing a deeper truth, a deeper meaning, and a deeper kind of power. A power that isn't about taking life, but giving life back to you. A power that isn't about taking your bread away, but by giving it to you freely. A world that's not with scarcity, but without scarcity. Not a world of anxiety, but a world without anxiety. And it only exists because of his willingness to go to the cross, to rewrite the standard by which we evaluate the world. It's the way in which we as Christians can be meek, right, and humble, and yet also have the most remarkable demonstrations of faith. Like you can have a meek, humble Christian who faces down a lion in the, Colosseum, or who is persecuted or loses their job, whatever it is, right? And yet they don't bend or compromise their faith. Like the reason why that occurs is because we understand that there's a different kind of power at play than the traditional ones. And Jesus is showing that, and I think the transfiguration is significant because it's that moment in which you see that this is of God. This is shining like the sun. This is the terrible, tremendous voice of heaven speaking down. And yet it's fulfilled in the cross. And that's the irony, that's the shame, but that's also the beauty, because it's the only way that the world can change. You can't change the world by doing the things that the world has done for however many thousands of years that mankind's been killing each other, I mean, how many kingdoms have risen and fallen? How many people, how many monarchs, how many rulers, how many philosophers, and it all results in the same thing except for Jesus, because he has changed everything. Yeah.
Paul on the road
Yeah.
Figured out what he needed to be doing. This might have been for Peter and them too. They hear the word of God, listen to him, you know, and that may have strengthened them to carry on better. You know, just like
Yeah.
Paul done a 90 degree, and faithful and worked.
Yeah.
Maybe that was for Peter and them too.
I mean, you can only imagine the years after the resurrection reflecting on this and understanding the significance of it and the way that that changes their perspective, to hear the voice of God proclaiming who Jesus was and how much that would have mattered to them. I mean, that's a big deal. Yeah, Rick. Yeah, I mean, all this is continuing to be revealed and understood. And part of that is this conversation in verses 9 through 13, right? Where they're like, okay, so you're the Messiah. God's told us that you're the Messiah. But wasn't Elijah supposed to come? So we're confused here. There's this understanding they have of the order of events. And they're like, but where's Elijah? And Jesus is like, John was Elijah. He's already come. And it's kind of this incredible thing where it's like, you're a lot farther along than you realized. You know, they're like, okay, we've got the Son of God, we've got the prophet, we've got the Messiah. And by the way, that confession by Peter in Matthew 16, some have argued that he isn't actually saying that Jesus is literally the Son of God, but he's a son of God in the way that you or I might be a son of God if we follow him. And so, like, maybe he didn't quite understand there the fullness of what he was proclaiming. I don't know. That it doesn't say that, so you'd have to be trying to infer something. But either way, like, here it is, you get this affirmation, and they're like, so, you know, where are we? And it's like, no, we're a lot farther down the road than you realize. Like this is we're a lot deeper into this situation than you even understood. And, you know, I don't know, I was trying to think of like a good analogy of that. It's like the Karate Kid, right? And Mr. Miyagi's having him wax the car and paint the fence. And he gets frustrated and he's like, what are we doing here? You know? And then he's like, wax on, you know, and he starts blocking the things. And he's like, arms are strong and he can like do these movements. And it's like, I didn't know that I was that far along in knowing karate, you know? I was waxing the car. I mean, it's kind of like that here for these men. Like, here they are. They thought they were just going around, like, doing some stuff. Like, the Messiah is going to come. This is pretty exciting. And then all of a sudden, it's like, no, Elijah's already come. Like, that part's fulfilled. We're in the middle of this messianic age. We're in the middle of what's going on. And I think the reason why that's shocking to them and why that would be so hard for them to accept is like, yeah, Jesus has given them the analogies of like, you know, you don't fast while the bridegroom is with you, right? Like, he's been telling them from the beginning of the book that we've been reading that the messianic age has come. The kingdom of heaven is like, right? And it's easy to look at them and think like, well, why don't they get it? Jesus has been telling them. And it's like, they just think they're waxing the car. Like, this is just part of it. You know what I mean? But like, that's all still coming later. Like, we're not ready for that just yet. And it's like, no, it's today. Like, and you're like, where did the time go? Like, how did we get to this point? I don't know. It's like you wake up on your wedding day or something and you're like, how did we get to today? Like, I'm not ready to be married. You're just like stunned. Like, we're a lot deeper into this than we realized, right? Like, a little bit farther along than I even understood. I mean, we have those moments in our life, right? And I think that's part of it for these men. And he's like, look, we're here. The time has come. Any final thoughts, questions? So as we move on, it says, and when they came to the crowd, a man came up to him and kneeling before him said, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he has seizures and he suffers terribly. For often he falls into the fire and often into the water, and I brought him to your disciples, and they could not heal him. And Jesus answered, O faithless and twisted generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him here to me. And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the boy was healed instantly. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, Why could we not cast it out? And he said to them, Because of your little faith. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, Move from here to there, and it'll move, and nothing will be impossible for you. Some have tried to draw parallels to this to almost like Sinai again, right? Moses is up on the mountain talking with God, and when he comes back down, the people have built a golden calf. They've already abandoned God. And although that's a much more extreme idea than this, it's almost that same flavor, isn't it? Like Jesus is gone for a few days up on the mountain, and he comes back, and they've already lost their faith. Like his separation from them just for a few days was enough for them to lose the faith requisite to be able to cast out this demon. That small separation from him, which is why he rebukes them, right? Like, you've got to be tougher than this because I'm going to be gone for a while, you know? You got to tighten up. I had a guy I worked with all the time. He would always say that. We were roofing. And he would just look at me and be like, got to tighten up. And I was like, what are you even talking about? Like, I'm working harder than you are. But he would always just say that, drove me nuts. But it's like, there's like a little bit of that here, right? Like, they've got to tighten up. Because Jesus isn't going to be with them forever. And he's gone for a few days, and like all of a sudden they can't cast out this demon. You know, they're not locked in the way that they need to be. And so he rebukes them. But the interesting thing to me is the last part, where he says, because of your little faith, for truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard, you'll say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it'll move, and nothing will be impossible for you. The first invitation I ever gave when I was 12, I wanted to talk about faith. And I think I asked my dad where this passage was in the Bible. I was like, Dad, where's the passage about mustard seed? And he was like, well, what are you going to say, son? So I like tried to tell him, and he's like, well, you need to organize it like this. You know, maybe start with this line. Like, ended up writing like the whole little invitation for me. And he was like, okay. So then you get up to do the invitation, you know, like 12 years old. And I like gave the invitation. The first line was like, read the passage. And you're like, no, I've never seen any mountains move. It was probably more like, I've never seen any mountains move. But like I said this, and then I finished, and then like some of you know Mike Sink, he went to church with us at the time. He came up and he's like, oh man, I thought you were going to start attacking our faith. And then he like kind of ripped apart my invitation. It's like a little 12-year-old. And I get in the car, and my dad like chastised me the whole way home about all the things I said wrong. And I remember thinking, you wrote it, Dad. Anyway, that was very much an aside. But, you know, story here about mountains moving. And my thought at the time was, yeah, you could move mountains with your faith. That's what it says. Take it at face value. Just that much faith, and you could pray. And if you believed enough, the mountain will move. Is that what it means? Is that what he's saying? You could literally move the mountains if you just have enough faith. So what's he saying? You don't have to answer. I put you on the spot.
They don't understand. They still don't understand. He had an impossible task because he has to break this idea. That's what Jesus is doing throughout all of Matthew. He is breaking their preconceived notion of what exactly the Messiah's purpose is. They understand that he's special. They understand that he's the Son of God, but they don't understand why he's there. They won't even until he comes. Peter would not have denied. He's going to deny, Jesus 3 times. We know that. They're going to make eye contact. And Peter's going to go and weep because he still doesn't understand. And obviously, after the fact, it's easy for us because we've grown up with the whole story the whole time. We don't understand just how difficult it would have been to only have the law of Moses and to be told by rabbis and teachers all of our life what exactly, we're going to have another leader like David who's going to come and take control and defeat the Romans. And I mean, that was really their mindset. It's really an impossible story that's trying stories or, in other religions, it's always about power. Like you said, what we as humans have seen before. And how is he going to defeat evil by death, by dying?
Yeah, and I'll take it even a step further. It isn't just that they had a hard time and we've grown up with the story. I would argue that there's a huge problem in this country where people think that the way that you change the world is through political means. That there is an evangelical movement that we need to take over every aspect of the country and change the world from within. And that we're going to change everything by having Christian leaders and all these different things. And it's that's not the point. Sure, if that happens, that's great. I'm all for it, I guess, if we could push Christian values everywhere. But that's not what Jesus was ever arguing for. That's the same mistake that Peter made. That's the same mistake that they all made, right? We vote based on our beliefs. We have the right to vote. It's a wonderful gift. We take advantage of that. Sure, all that's fine. But there's a difference between perceiving the world as something that we are going to fix through political means versus recognizing that God's already in control. And if God wanted to take over a country and put his David in charge, that's what he would have done. Instead, he redeemed the world through the death of Jesus. It's a different process by which you change the world. And that's a really hard thing for me to understand. That's a really hard thing for everybody to understand, which is why you have, I think, a religious-driven political movement that exists. Because that's not the point of our religion, to change things politically. And that's a hard line to argue, and maybe that's controversial in some ways, but I think that it's indicative of the same problem, that we fall into that same trap. I don't know, there's a fine dividing line there, so hopefully I didn't. Yeah. Right. God will transform it when the time is right. And so that's a difficult kind of thing. Hopefully I didn't offend anybody, and hopefully I clarified that carefully enough. But in contrast to that, Jesus is making this point to them. And I would argue it's not about the amount of faith, right? I always looked at this as there's this big thing that's done by a little bit of faith. So bigger faith would do an even bigger thing. I think what Jesus is saying is it isn't about the faith itself. It's about the faith in what you believe in. God, with your tiny little faith as a mustard seed, can move mountains. He has that kind of power. The point is not about your amount of faith, it's about what your faith is in. And that's the idea all along. It isn't about our faith, it's about our faith in God's faithfulness. Our belief that God will do what he has said he will do. Our belief that God has the power to do any and all of these things. Our belief that God will redeem the world and transform things. And our amount of faith isn't the thing that factors into that equation. It's God's power that's doing it all. You just have to believe in that. And even if you believe with the faith of a mustard seed, a tiny little thing, that's enough because of the thing that you're believing in to even move the mountains of the world. And so that's the problem that they had, is that they struggled with understanding the real power of God in relation to these miracles and anything else. And so they're trying to do the right thing or say it the right way or have the right amount of faith. And it's it doesn't have anything to do with you. God's the one that's taking care of this. And it's the demons that are Jesus we know, Paul we know, who are you, right? The whole thing is it isn't about you. It's about the one that you believe in that's able to perform these things. And it's a much more external sort of process, I think. Yeah, Ian, with your hand up. Right. Well, and it was never the point. I mean, even the cleanliness laws and all those things, they misunderstood the point of those things as well. I mean, I maybe this is a bad comparison, but it's why do you wake up and take a shower and put on nice clothes to come to church? Is it because the nice clothes and the shower are the things that allow your worship to be acceptable to God? I don't know that any of us would argue that. But there is a benefit to preparing yourself physically for what you're about to do. You go through the motions of preparing yourself. You take a shower, you clean up, you shave, you put on a nice clothes, because it shows that you're taking serious what you're doing. And the cleanliness laws are the same sort of thing. Like what we do does affect our mindset and our perspective. And the problem is, you get caught up in, well, you got to dress this way. Well, it isn't really about what you wear. We understand that. But we also understand that what you wear is a reflection of your mindset. Like, you don't go to a funeral and disrespect somebody by wearing flip-flops and a tank top, maybe there's a world in which that happens under certain circumstances, but typically that's not what we do. Why? Because we want to show respect for the dead and for the people that are mourning. When we go to a wedding, it's the same thing. We tend to dress nicer or wear certain attire to show our respect and reverence for the event that's there. And so, that sort of preparation is all part of what existed even under the law and even now. And they misunderstood it, like Ian said. They thought we checked these boxes and it's all good, as opposed to understanding that all of these things are part of teaching us an understanding and a perspective about God's holiness, about the holiness of our bodies, about right and wrong, about clean and unclean, about acceptable and unacceptable. And it's all part of this process of developing their minds and their perspectives. They misunderstood it. Verse 22. As they were gathering in Galilee, Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and he will be raised on the third day. And they were greatly distressed. At this point, Jesus just keeps telling them, I'm going to die, and I'm going to be resurrected on the third day. And they're just like, Jesus, stop talking about dying. Obviously there's your pretty remarkable circumstances, but just in general, even when people are ingesting, talking about I'm going to kill myself or something, you're like, probably don't do that, right? There was a comedy years ago about a guy, it's called High Strung, and he just rants about everything, and he just gets worked up about the dumbest things, and he just gets angry and angry until he says, I wish I were dead. And he says it so much that finally the movie ends. He says it so much that death comes and takes him. It's like you can only say you wish you were dead so many times before your life is taken. And then, of course, it's a comedy, so then he annoys death so much that death sends him back. And then he's mad at death for this is whatever. Silly comedy, right? But there's this sense that we have about that sort of stuff. Stop talking about your death. We don't need to be talking about how often you're going to die. We don't need to hear this, Jesus. It's going to be okay. You need to calm down. And so they're greatly distressed because the more he talks about it, the more they're like, he's not kidding. And he keeps telling them and he keeps preparing them. And they're like, we don't want to hear it. And you don't blame them, I don't think. Right. And now he knows better than to do that, at least, it seems like. But you could tell that he's still just come on, stop.
Have you ever been in a situation where you finally start getting, you finally start understanding? Then somebody says, by the way, this is going to end. You're not going to have me anymore. I'm not going to be here to talk to you. I'm not going to be your best friend anymore. I'm not going to protect you. I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to feed you. I'm not going to give you things to do. Yes, you're just starting to get it, but it's going to end.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine the emotions that pour over. And Jesus doesn't, in a way here, he's not condemning them because you're human. But he's trying to get them past that so that they can grow and they can get past. Because another fact that comes back to the transfiguration is they have to believe to the point of conviction of death. And I need to solidify in your mind, in your heart, that you're willing to die for all of them. And here, he's telling them, that's how much I'm in it.
And to be fair to them, too, in their disbelief and not getting it, it's like a movie, right? Where, the good guy dies in the end. There's, this great love story, and then he dies, and you're like, okay, you're waiting for him to not actually be dead, it was a dream, or they time travel, or she has magic tears that like bring him back to life, like it's some Disney movie or something, like you keep waiting for the twist, like how is it going to be okay? And you can only imagine that they're greatly distressed because they're like trying to find the loophole. Like, surely he doesn't mean what he's saying. And he keeps saying, no, I'm going to die. I will be delivered into the hands of men and they will kill him. And he will be raised on the third day. And they're like, okay, where's the loophole here? Killed. That seems pretty definitive. Maybe he means like, because I don't know they would have thought like we do. We're always like, oh, like spiritual death. Like we always try to like kind of like skirt it that way. Like not really dead, just spiritually dead. Almost like that's not as bad or something, Like Adam and Eve only spiritually died. They didn't really die. Well, they did die. Like, right? Like they died. But it's like you want to like find the loophole. It's like they're trying to find the loophole with Jesus. And they're greatly distressed because they can't find the loophole. Maybe that's reading into it too much. But there's this sense about it, right? So then this last section, and this is the other kind of, I think, strange miracle story. In verse 24, when they came to Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma tax went up to Peter and said, does your teacher not pay the tax? And he said, yes. And when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, what do you think, Simon? From whom do kings of the earth take toll or tax? From their sons or from others? And when he said, from others, Jesus said to him, then the sons are free. However, not to give offense to them, go to the sea and cast a hook and take the first fish that comes up. And when you open its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take that and give it to them for me and for yourself. Why doesn't Jesus want to offend these people? I mean, he's more than willing to offend a lot of other people. He establishes that he doesn't have to pay the tax, right? It's not required of me. But then he's also not willing to just like go to Judas, get the money out of the money bag and pay the tax, right? He's like, no. Just go catch a fish and you'll find the money in the mouth of the fish and pay him off with that. Like, we're not going to use real money. We're going to use miracle money, right? Like it's kind of a weird little story. What do you all make of it? Any thoughts pop into your head? Any questions? Yeah. Yeah.
He meets his obligation, his civic responsibility.
But he does it when they say, who's on the coin, and they ask him about paying taxes, lend the things to Caesar, things to Caesar's God. So it's like pay those taxes, right? Because that's Caesar's money anyway. Pay the temple tax. Yeah. 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 Some argue that the money isn't literally in the fish's mouth, but you catch the fish, you sell the fish, and use the money you get from selling the fish to pay the tax. That seems like that's trying to skirt around the miracle part of it. Yeah.
There's an issue here of doing all things honorable in the sight of all men, showing that you're doing what's right, not for the sake of showing off, but doing what's right so that you can set that example for other people. And I think what Jesus is doing here is kind of dealing with an optics issue. I mean, we can look at the way Queen Elizabeth, even though she didn't have to, she paid taxes into the British Treasury every year. And one of the things I'm sure that did is that helped her keep the respect of her subjects in the British kingdom. And I think that rebellious or wrong or hinder that.
Yeah, it's like another example of Jesus finding a way to maneuver between and around people, right? Because it's like they come and they try to test him, and he always has the answer. And they can't trap him, and he turns it back around on them. And he knows more than they do, and he has more power than they do, and he sees their traps, and he springs the trap on them, right? And it's kind of like an incredible thing. And I think this is kind of in that same ilk. That like, yeah, there's like an optics element to this. This is an obligation that everybody pays. I don't have to pay this, but we'll pay it. But we're not going to really pay it. We'll only kind of pay it because you'll go catch the fish and pay with it this way to demonstrate that I don't have to pay it, but I'm doing it anyway. It's like this kind of layered way of responding to this, and it's almost more for Peter than anybody else. Because it isn't like everybody's going to see Peter go catch the fish and pull the coin out of the mouth and then go, you know. And it's also interesting that this only occurs in Matthew's gospel. Maybe because Matthew's a tax collector and he wants to make sure everybody pays their taxes. I don't know. But it is like this kind of interesting optics thing, like James is saying about trying to, I don't want to say finagle, but kind of find his way through even these situations as only Jesus can. So it's definitely interesting. Was there another hand I missed? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, he's still in Capernaum. He's not in Jerusalem. Maybe these men aren't evil. They're just doing their job, collecting the tax, right? As opposed to maybe the Pharisees that were manipulating the temple rules. Anyway. But there we are. Finished chapter. We'll get in chapter 18 next time. Did I miss any hands? I think so. Thank you for your all attention and comments this morning.